Join one of Virginia's oldest and most experienced personal injury law firms as we explore how the law does and doesn't work, the art of leadership, and the power of community. Now, here are your hosts, Peter Burnett and Jonathan Sleeter.
Well, today we have the pleasure of having, for me, probably the longest living resident of Leesburg that I know, Norman Myers, who has been here in Leesburg for 70 plus years, since he was a little child. His parents owned a business here in town, back to when there was an opera house in downtown Leesburg that got torn down. Many people today don't even have the slightest idea where that is. And Norman's had a long career as a distinguished appraiser here in Leesburg. I would hate to count the number of properties that he has appraised for me, but that's been a full-time undertaking of his for decades. And one of the neat things that Norman's been doing for a number of years now is helping Friends of the Blue Ridge accomplish their good efforts to preserve that beautiful landscape to our west. And we thought our listeners would get a kick out of hearing some details of the good stuff they do. As coincidence would have it, Norman has just come from a recent annual meeting and can tell us all the latest developments and who's gotten what awards for good efforts to keep the Blue Ridge as pristine and beautiful as it is, and even to do a few things to help people enjoy it, like a project in Round Hill right now that his group has undertaken. But Norman, give us a quick overview of how the Friends of the Blue Ridge came to be and how many folks are involved in it and what you all do.
Well, it started, I believe, with wasn't there from the beginning, but a lady named Jane Pratt, who took an interest in mountains and environmental stewardship, and her husband, Jed Schilling. I've been involved. Carol Napolitano was involved early on. Al Van Hyke, just some of the names. And Peter, you make me sound like a good old boy, and I'm not ready for that. But
we'll call you the good old boy exception.
Okay,
how about that?
I'm still pretty young, at heart.
For your years, you certainly act many years younger than you are, and that's why we wanted you to keep praising for another 20 or 30 years at least,
Okay, good. So anyway, back to the topic. So anyway, their plan was, yes, to maintain the environment there and enhance it. It geographically, our area is from the Potomac River north at Harper's Ferry, because everything above that is state or national forest and or parkland, down to Skyline Drive in Warren County in Front Royal, because that's also national forest down there. This one area of the Blue Ridge is not protected in that way, so we took on the mission of protecting the Blue Ridge and helping people enjoy it. The Appalachian Trail, of course, goes through that area. So we want people to enjoy the beautiful mountains and countryside. We're concerned with the environment. It's a place where water can be absorbed. Our streams come from the mountains. The water is absorbed by the mountains and goes down into the underground aquifer, and that's what replenishes the wells and streams and rivers. So it's very important. I think we're concerned with wildlife and preservation of flora and fauna against the invasive species. So that's kind of what we're about, stewardship.
Right, and let me ask you a couple questions just in terms of examples, if you will, of challenges to the Blue Ridge. Really, two of them come to mind, quite different. One is the AT&T building that was built up there on Short Hill. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's Short Hill. And you get to it by going up 671 between the hills, as if you were going to Harper's Ferry, out on the west side of Hillsborough, and going up there. And it's to the east of that, up on the top of the mountain, it's a big old building. So I can imagine that your group had some opinions about the appropriateness of that facility being there, number one, and then if it were allowed to stay, how it would be perceived, what it would look like, what kind of road would go up to it, and that kind of thing. And then the other large impact, if you will, on that area that's close to home for us is Mount Weather. And the interesting thing about Mount Weather is it started as being underground, and I'm told, and don't know because it's a big secret, that there is a town about the size of a couple blocks of downtown Leesburg underground at Mount Weather. And at one time, the United States Congress in its entirety was intended to be moved there in the event of any nuclear disaster. That has all changed in one form or another. And the use of it, FEMA runs it, but the use of it, as I understand it now, is that were there to be some problem with the Department of Printing and Engraving, that Social Security checks and other things like that could be handled out of that facility. And the reason I raised that one, I'm talking underground now, but it now has a fairly significant above ground component to it that, again, is visible and is something that you folks might want to be involved in making sure it stays as integrated as possible. I mean, am I hitting on things that you folks are interested in?
Yes, that first project you mentioned, the AT&T proposal to put a data center on top of the Short Hill, would have been a very imposing building in a very inappropriate place. That's where we really rallied and became known for our strong opposition to that. As a result, I mean, we talked to politicians and we talked to the planners and the zoning administrators, and just how could this happen? You know, how could they put a big building, a data center on top? They called it a switching center, so there were various ways they were snaking through it.
Oh, they gave it a more acceptable name? Was that the idea?
Yeah, because data switching centers or phone centers, you know,
sure,
by the code were allowable by special exception. It was also in the mountain overlay zone, but because the mountain had already been leveled up top, it's not considered mountain overlay because it was disturbed soil. So
that which has been desecrated is no longer entitled to protection. Is that how that goes?
That's true. You could only desecrate it. I guess you can desecrate it more.
Right.
So,
okay. All right.
Right. So yeah, we talked to Gary Higgins in that area and got with Sam Croy, people up in Lovettsville, and took a pretty strong stand on that. And finally, what happened after enough protests from us and the residents of Lovettsville area is AT&T withdrew.
Did they really?
They withdrew the request to do it above ground. So instead, they're doing it underground. They're expanding their underground facility.
Taking a page out of Mount Weather's book, apparently.
Yes, yeah, and apparently it was entitled and didn't require any additional approvals.
That's an interesting solution. And what was your group's view of that approach? I mean, I could imagine that some people might say, well, yeah, that's okay as long as you can't see it, and others might say, well, wait a minute, you know, what are we doing? Digging into this natural beauty and having trucks coming and going from it and all the rest.
Well, that's been happening. The concrete trucks have been coming and going up there for a long time. So there's a lot of activity, and of course we don't like it. We didn't see any legal grounds to challenge it. You know, they knew our opinion and they just did it. And I guess we said, okay, great. We won the best part of the war,
so
let's
had
not
a
take on battles.
Victory.
Yeah. And so I don't like to take on battles that we can't win. You know.
Sure. No, and you want to be reasonable and integrate. I'm sure you heard that 911 service and such things are going to be critically important to this facility being properly constructed, and they sort of you get some political stuff thrown at you a little bit.
A whole lot. I mean, and all the jobs it was going to create.
Bingo.
Like, we need more jobs, right?
Yeah.
What are the differences between the environmental impact of the facility being underground versus it being above ground?
It's not as large. I mean, what we think they were doing was they had land, 160 acres or so they already owned up there, that they wanted to put a data center on, because data centers are quite popular, as you understand, in Loudoun County now. So they already own the land, so they probably figured it was a good economic solution to it. But I'm sure it doesn't have nearly the intensity of the size there. So rather than go down east and buy land, data center land that's selling now for $25 a foot, for some of it, they thought they could just use the land that existed. But they obviously are doing much less space-wise up there than they could have done. It was going to be about, I think, 160,000 square foot building.
Yeah, there's a lot of building.
Yeah.
There's a lot of building.
And it's probably not economical to go underground that much, but they still have some of the same problems as far as the traffic going up there goes, as far as the effluent coming from it, as far as the generators going off, creating noise and all that. But, we did what we could, so we were happy.
Well, you made some progress on that.
A lot.
And it was a compromise of sorts, but you can say that everybody won something, and nobody had a complete defeat either, which is a good thing. A whole lot better than if you folks hadn't been involved.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I think we got that one turned.
Well, let me ask you about I neglected to mention a third one that isn't right in the zone but is impacted by it, and I think you'll have some comment on it. This manufacturing plant that they're talking about over in Jefferson County, that there's been a lot of publicity about potential pollution to the air, and what does Virginia have to say about it anyway, since it's being built in another state in West Virginia. And I can't say I'm intimately familiar with that whole project. I just read an article about it about every month or so, and I'm wondering if you folks got engaged in that particular issue at all.
Yeah, we've definitely been in touch with the people there in Ranson that are opposing the Rockwool plant, is what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, yep.
And we've been involved and communicated with them. I passed some messages and talked to Mark Herring about it, our Attorney General for the state. And Mark just kind of, he would do what he could, but he was not real hopeful because, I said, can you challenge through the EPA or something? Well, what's happened to the EPA recently, so,
right.
It's going to it just wasn't a fight that he would win, I guess. But the people of Ranson have done a lot of work on that, including some members of our board that live over in Shepherdstown. And other people we know. We've been following it. We've been supporting it in terms of they had a fundraiser for legal fees to combat it at Bro Vineyard. We attended that and took a booth there and supported their efforts. They raised a lot of money, by the way.
Well, and just so that I'm clear, the objection to it by your group and others is one of essentially air pollution?
I'd say primarily air pollution, just a concern for the environment. I mean, it burns a lot of fossil fuel.
It does?
Oh, yeah. It's very intensive use of fossil fuels. In fact, they have put in, this is helping to finance indirectly, a gas line that's coming up from West Virginia.
Really?
So it helps fund putting in a huge underground gas line into the panhandle of West Virginia, which it doesn't have now. So it opens up not just for them, but they were encouraged by the fossil fuel producers, the gas people, to do it. That's why West Virginia wanted it, because it helped move the gas along, and it helped their drilling of gas.
Is that why the Rockwool people, which I understand is a European country, a company, picked this location in West Virginia or even in the United States? What is so attractive about Ranson, West Virginia, for a company to come from another country across the ocean and open a plant?
Well, West Virginia is pretty lax when it comes to environmental protection, and they have a lot of latitude in doing it. I'm sure they talked to them, and I'm just speculating, but I would say that they were encouraged by the state to do it because of the revenues. It's one of the big coal-producing areas of the country, so they're interested in fossil fuels, and that's how
Or substituting fossil fuels. They're substituting gas for the dying coal
gas
industry.
Is a fossil.
No, I understand that, but in terms of gradations, that West Virginia might feel a little better burning gas, fracked as it is, versus coal, which is in the state of West Virginia, as I understand it, they're still taking the tops off of mountains, doing open mining of coal, which is something that's got to be abhorrent to your group.
Yeah, totally. So maybe maybe natural gas is through fracking is less invasive than coal and strip mining. Yeah. But it may have long-term effects, negative long-term effects too, in terms of the aquifer.
Oh, I think a lot of people would agree with that notion for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that one's in your sights at a certain level, even though it's they're distant sites, so to speak, because they're across the state line, and you've only got so much that you can do. But it seems like your group has raised public awareness about the issues associated with it. On a much smaller scale and a much more personal level, I understand that your group has undertaken to create a trail from Franklin Park up there on the west side of Purcellville to the north end of Sleeter Lake, because you had good fortune, or we have the good fortune of someone having donated about 100 acres of land that would connect the two. I got that right?
Not quite. It started with...
that's good. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, well, it started with, we're looking for a project. We want to have not just theory and what's going on. We'd like to have a demonstration project to teach people, children, stewardship. And we were looking for a project in the county that we could do to bring awareness of the environment and things you could do to help the environment along around here. So we looked at several places and finally settled with the help of the Loudoun County Wildlife Conservancy on Sleeter Lake. And the town was very open to it, and they said, sure, you can come and help us, and we have kind of a notion of a plan of things we want to do, but yeah, we could use
the town
around Hill. We could use your help with Sleeter Lake.
And Sleeter Lake, just to be clear, was man-made by John Sleeter's father, if I'm not mistaken, about 70 or 80 years ago as a watering source for his orchards. Do I have that right?
You have that right. That is correct. That's what I understand, too. Yes. In the 60s, I think, is when it was.
Was it that late? Okay.
It was pretty recent, relatively.
I row a little bit, and at that lake has a ramp on the north end, and I've put in there many, many, many times and rode the length of it. It's a beautiful row, particularly in moonlight, down the lake and back. It's terrific.
So we thought that would be a good place to participate in a project. We went on a tree planting. We first of all started with one of our board members has an environmental sustainability company where he does plans, designs, and management, land management, James Ramuzzi. And so we asked him about drawing up a plan for taking they had, I think the park's about 30 acres or so. And it was a donation as a part of a proffer from the development up in Round Hill. All right, so it had good potential. It has a great waterfront, and it's got some natural trees and paths through it, and open lands. And I thought it might make a good facility. And so we thought in terms of draw us a land plan, James. How should this be done? What should it look like? And he put some path through there, and we took another path that was already there through the woods, and we're cleaning that up. We're wanting to plant trees, so we went on a large tree planting campaign last year in conjunction with what the town wants. They're talking in the future of having a pavilion for teaching children in classes on what environmental sustainability. There's an old stone farmhouse there that way predates the lake itself.
Right down there on the corner where the road turns into the park?
Yes, it's down there.
It needs some help. It's very cool to look at.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that we did, I encouraged and found the Banshee Reeks Archaeological Society.
There you go.
They did a little archaeological dig around the house and to see what's there. And they've completed their dig.
They find anything interesting?
The report is going to come out in December.
Okay.
They said a lot of more recent things, but we don't know yet. So they're going to tell us.
They'll find something.
We encourage them. Yeah, I'm sure they found something. And then the next phase is I've talked to the people at the Loudoun Preservation group, and they could be interested in some restoration there too.
That would be neat, because that building, I think, I've looked at it a little bit, and I think that building has got, it needs more than one good stonemasons to work on it. But there's a lot of stone in it, and it's kind of a cool shape, I think, in terms of the building itself.
Yeah.
And it could be an impressive building. I don't know what it would be used for, but, maybe a administrative office for a park, or maybe residential, or something else, or a teaching area for you guys.
Well, we're looking at alternatives right now of the feasibility of restoration. Sure. It might not be feasible to restore it, but we want to stabilize it and keep it there.
Cut the trees out of it that are growing up through the living room.
That sort of thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I do have a stonemason that I've talked to that I'm hopeful will help us see what it needs to stabilize it.
Sure.
Start with that, and then go from there to see what else could be done. But there are other interesting things to be done. Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you, though, the 30 acres that's there at the end of Sleeter Lake, that 30 acres doesn't connect over, does it, to Franklin Park?
No, so that brings it to the second part of your question.
Here we
assumptions
go.
Here is that thanks to Tony Buffington, who's the supervisor from the not Catoctin, it's the other district over toward Middleburg.
Blue Ridge?
I forget what they call it.
Blue Ridge District? Blue Ridge District, yeah,
okay.
I think so.
I should know.
That's one you definitely should know.
Yeah, right.
Given the organization you're working with.
Absolutely. Okay. But I don't vote there, so that's why I don't remember it. So,
there you go. All right,
anyway. But Tony Buffington has been very helpful, very supportive of us all the way through. He's helped us with TDRs and other various things. And
TDRs being
transfer development right, or I should say conservation easements specifically. Sure. We've talked to him about TDRs. That's another whole issue. I won't get into that right now.
Okay.
Anyway, he was instrumental in, not to our encouragement, but he did, not based on what we encouraged, but on his own, he realized that Lerner Corporation owns a parcel of land between Franklin Park and Sleeter Lake Park. So he figured out, that would be really nice to have some recreation there and to extend Franklin Park and put some more trails through there.
And let's be clear here, too, just so everybody knows, this is the same Lerner family that happens to own the Washington Nationals, right?
Yes.
Right. So they can afford to be generous, and they are. And they're, having made this donation, is going to have a pretty significant impact, which you're about to tell us about.
It's not a donation.
Okay, all right. I didn't know that they had wrong.
They are selling the land to the county. The Tony saw that it was worthwhile putting the land, buying the land, and connecting things up with the trails and all that between the two parks. And because really, when you look at the long-term goals of what we want to do, and this is other members, other organizations, we'd like to see a system of trails throughout all of Loudoun County.
Sure.
And there's a program called the Emerald Ribbon.
I've heard of that.
Which is hoping to knit all these trails, the Appalachian Trail and the WNOD Trail.
And along Goose Creek.
And
Panther Skin, or whatever that one's called, that's into Goose Creek. There's some nice opportunities there.
Yeah, and it would be a great way to link the county up, go from open space to open space, connect historic sites together, provide services as well to Eastern Loudoun. We don't consider ourselves an Eastern Loudoun, a Western Loudoun kind of organization. We really reach out to the East as well. These are people in the East that use recreation. We've talked to some of the supervisors down there that encourage us and support us.
I think I've seen some surveys, formal and informal, about how much folks who live in relatively densely populated neighborhoods on the eastern end of the county, how much they value having the West remain relatively open.
Right.
Every time they sort of take the temperature of folks, the instinct would be, well, why would somebody in Ashburn really care what happens up in Round Hill? In fact, they do. Yes. And they like the idea of living in a county that has, and in some ways we're modeling counties, Montgomery County in Maryland, for example. It has very dense East End and a very open West End.
Right. And they have a very aggressive TDR program, too, which is the reason a lot of it's not developed in the west of Montgomery County.
Right.
Transfer of development rights.
And some in Montgomery County, just to introduce a little controversy, would say one of the reasons is because they haven't permitted a bridge to go across at Lansdowne at the extension of Route 28 so that we all have to keep using 15 and clog that thing up a whole lot. But those are problems that come with growth, and Lord knows we've seen plenty of growth in Loudoun County.
There is going to be growth. Apparently, we know that. We just want to see it happen in the right way. We're not against growth.
Yep,
we want proper growth that's balanced with the affordable housing is a big thing now to deal with, and we're
schools are a big issue.
Schools,
it's expensive.
Finances, land preservation, they all have to work in harmony. Decent urban lifestyles, So we work also, and speaking of all that, we're getting into another area of the Loudoun County Loudoun County Preservation and Conservation Coalition.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is. It's a coalition of about 70 organizations in the area.
70?
I believe they said 70. Maybe it's 50. Don't quote
but
me.
a whole bunch.
But it's a whole bunch of organizations,
yeah.
right? All concerned with preservation, conservation, and it's not a membership type organization, but representatives from each of these organizations that is a member has comes for monthly.
So it essentially fosters communication amongst these folks that have generally common outlooks for the benefit of the county. Is that
exactly,
fair?
Exactly, and that's a lot of where we have a synergistic relationship with them. Also, as a member, we combine with other people. We work with the Wildlife Conservancy, for example, and the Loudoun Preservation Organization, a lot of other like-minded organizations. So we found a new power in that, and a new voice.
And I consistent with what I said about folks in the East who may live in a more dense environment, being protective of a more open environment, I take it that the broader the audience you can find and the further you can cast your net on these important issues, the better for everybody. Not just the folks out in the West, but the East as well. Exactly.
It becomes political, and we think we have more and more support from the board members. The prior board was listening to us. We didn't get everything we wanted. We had a lot of input on the comprehensive plan and how that goes, and we got a lot of what we wanted in there. We didn't get everything, but we're still working on it. And now with the new board, we have hope that we can continue.
So you're optimistic that your goals are going to continue to be met. Is that fair?
Yes, and we're very encouraged that Tony Buffington, the supervisor from that area, has a good relationship with the other board members. He's been a strong supporter of our causes. He wants to see Western Loudoun conserved and maintained as it is in certain ways. So, yes, we want to continue that.
It sounds like you're putting a fair amount of your very valuable time, and I know how hard you work at your appraisal business and what a popular appraiser you are, and have people asking you for your services all the time. It sounds to me like you're putting a number of hours every week into this organization. Is that fair?
Yes, especially with the SWAT team. That was a team from the coalition. I served as a member on that. They did a lot of redrafting of the ordinance, of the comprehensive plan ordinance, and talking to supervisors and staff people at the county about what's going on. Does this make sense, and so forth. So, yeah, I put a lot of time in it. It has benefits, personal rewarding benefits, and knowing that I'm doing something that matters, that I care about. Also benefit that I have a jump in a deeper understanding of the zoning and how things work here and how to interpret zoning ordinances and how the whole development process works.
Which gets more complicated every day.
It does.
When I came to Loudoun County 40 plus years ago, the population was about 40,000 people. Today, I'm told it's about 413,000,
right,
which is kind of a guesstimate, but goes to show you a tenfold increase. I'm guessing when you were a child in Leesburg, the population of Loudoun County was something in the nature of 30 or 35,000. Does that sound about right to you?
That sounds about right. I think the town of Leesburg, I remember my father saying, when I asked him, he said about 800 people.
Wow. Wow. Because today, the population of Leesburg, if I'm not mistaken, and you may know this from your demographics and your appraisals, but is about 60,000. Does that sound about right? High 50s?
I think we're over 40.
Oh,
40 is the number I think of.
They're saying that the 2020 census is going to be about 62 or 63,000.
Really? Okay, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to check, but that's a whole lot more than 800 people.
Yeah.
Right? Well, Norman, listen, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. And what we would love to do is check back in with you in another whatever as various events take place in the beautiful Blue Ridge and hear what progress you've been making.
Okay, and I would encourage everybody in the meantime that's interested to check out friendsofblueridgemountain.org for a website, donations, keep volunteer opportunities, other ways of supporting us.
Do you all have a Facebook page?
Yes, we do. Friends of Blue Ridge Mountains.org. I'm sure that'll take you there. I can't tell you what. If you Google Friends of Blue Ridge Mountains, I'm sure you'll find it on Facebook.
We don't expect you to have the technological savvy of the average 8th grader. You and I both have gray hair. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you, Norman.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to Law and Community, a podcast from Burnett and Williams. If you have any questions or wish to learn more, please leave us a message at our website, www.burnettwilliams.com. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to. Don't forget to follow our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/BurnettWilliams and give us a call at 703-777-1650 for any questions you have. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Until next time, take care.